Hello, everyone. Welcome to English Today Journey. I'm so happy to see you here. My name is Jara, and I will be your guide on this journey to learning English. If this is your first time listening, I want to give you a very warm welcome. I'm really glad you are here. You didn't find this podcast by chance. You are here because you want to learn, to improve your English, and to grow your confidence. You want to invest in yourself, and that is amazing. It shows that you are serious about your learning, and that makes me really excited. Here at Super English Talks, we believe that learning English is not just about memorizing grammar rules or learning long lists of words. Of course, those things are important, but real learning goes much further. Learning English is about communication. It is about feeling confident when you speak. It is about being able to connect with people in real life. That is what we want for you here. Every day, I share lessons that are simple, practical, and easy to follow. These lessons don't just help you speak English better. They also help you in your daily life. They give you confidence and help you take small steps toward your goals. Learning English is a journey, and every small step counts. The more you practice, the more progress you make, and the easier English becomes. If you are ready to practice every day, to stay motivated, and to take steady steps toward improving your English, then you are in the right place. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button so you won't miss any of our daily tips and lessons. And if you enjoy this episode, share it with a friend who is also learning English. Learning together makes it more fun, and it helps you stay motivated. Now, let's talk about today's topic. Today, we will learn how to speak English more easily and more naturally. This is not just another lesson about grammar rules or long vocabulary lists. Those things are useful, but today we will focus on something different. We will focus on how people really learn and use English in everyday life. I will give you practical strategies that you can use every day. These strategies are simple, but they are very powerful. They will help you speak more confidently and fluently. I will also give you many examples that you can try yourself. The goal is to help you feel comfortable when speaking English. You don't have to worry about mistakes. Making mistakes is part of learning, and every mistake is a step forward. Learning English is not just about studying. It is about using the language, speaking with others, and practicing a little bit every day. When you do this, English becomes easier and more natural. You'll notice that speaking becomes faster. Your vocabulary grows, and your confidence increases. Step by step, day by day, you can reach your English goals. So, get ready to practice, stay patient, and keep going. Every little step counts. Every day you learn a little, and soon you will see big results. Learning English is a journey, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Let's have fun, stay motivated, and make progress together. In this lesson, we will look at real-life situations that you probably face every day. I will also show you ways to practice English, get involved in conversations, and build your confidence step by step. Learning English is not just about knowing words and grammar. It is about being able to use English in real life, and that is exactly what we will focus on. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt this way? You know the words. You have studied grammar. You have learned phrases. But when it's time to speak, nothing comes out. Maybe your mind goes completely blank. Or maybe your thoughts are moving too fast as you try to translate every word from your own language into English. By the time you finally form a sentence, the conversation has already moved on. It can feel very discouraging, right? I understand this feeling very well, because I have been there too. When I first tried to speak another language, it felt like I had to build every sentence slowly, brick by brick, just like constructing a wall. And while I was still thinking and building, the person I was talking to had already asked another question or changed the topic. It felt like swimming against a strong current. Very tiring and very frustrating. Maybe you have experienced the same thing. You understand the language. You can read it. You can listen to it. You can even write it. But when it comes to speaking, the words get stuck. It feels like they're trapped inside your head and cannot come out smoothly. The good news is this: that feeling is completely normal. Almost every person who learns a language goes through it. You are not alone. The even better news is that you can overcome it. Speaking English fluently is something you can achieve with practice and the right approach. And that is exactly what we are going to work on together. Fluency does not mean speaking perfectly. It does not mean that you never make mistakes. It does not mean sounding exactly like a native speaker. Fluency is something much more important. Fluency means being able to share your ideas clearly. It means being able to express your thoughts and feelings even if your grammar is not perfect. It means being able to speak with confidence even if you make mistakes along the way. Think about it this way. You don't need to have perfect English to communicate. What matters is that people can understand you and that you can express yourself. The more you practice speaking, the easier it becomes. Your sentences will start to flow more naturally, your thoughts will come out faster, and your confidence will grow. Little by little, step by step, you will get closer to your goals. In today's lesson, I will give you practical exercises to help you speak more smoothly. I will share techniques to help you stop translating in your head and start thinking directly in English. I will also give examples of real conversations so you can see how people really talk. This is about learning how English works in real life, not just in books. Remember, fluency is a journey, not a destination. It takes patience, practice, and courage. Every time you speak, even if it's imperfect, you are improving. Every mistake is a step forward. So let's focus on practicing, building confidence, and learning to speak English naturally. By the end of this journey, speaking English will feel easier, more comfortable, and much more enjoyable. That is exactly what I want for you. I want you to feel free and relaxed when you speak English. I want you to stop worrying so much about mistakes and start focusing on communicating your ideas. Because here's the truth, people will understand you even if you make small errors. What really matters is your message, your thoughts, and your effort to connect with others. In today's lesson, we're going to start breaking down the barriers that make speaking English feel hard. Step by step, I will show you how to practice speaking naturally, how to reduce hesitation, and how to slowly build the confidence you need to have real conversations. You will learn to express your thoughts clearly, even if your grammar is not perfect. Remember, learning to speak English is a journey, not a race. It takes time, patience, and consistent practice. Every day you practice, no matter how small the step, you are moving closer to fluency. And the best part is that you are not alone. I am here with you every day, guiding you, supporting you, and reminding you that you are making progress, even if it feels slow sometimes. Every effort counts. Every small success matters. So, are you ready to start? Today, we begin our journey towards speaking English more easily, more fluently, and more confidently. Remember, fluency is not just about memorizing words or learning grammar rules. Fluency is about connecting with people naturally, joining conversations, sharing your ideas, and taking part in daily situations. This includes things like ordering food, asking for directions, or chatting with friends without feeling stressed or stuck in your head, translating everything word by word. Think of fluency not as climbing a steep, dangerous mountain where every mistake makes you fall back down. Instead, imagine it like learning to ride a bicycle. At first, you feel wobbly. You might lose your balance. You might even fall a few times. But every time you get up and try again, you get better. Each time you practice, your confidence grows. Soon, what was difficult starts to feel easy. You no longer have to think about balancing or pedaling. You just enjoy the ride. You move forward freely and confidently. That is exactly how learning English works. At the beginning, it can feel scary or uncomfortable. Speaking might feel slow. Your mind might race, trying to translate everything. You might worry about mistakes. That is normal. Every language learner goes through this. But the more you practice speaking, the easier it becomes. Step by step, speaking English will feel natural. You will gain confidence and conversations will flow more smoothly. The key is patience, consistent effort, and a focus on communication over perfection. Mistakes are not failures. They are part of learning. Every time you speak, Every time you try, you are improving. And with time, the language that once felt difficult and stressful will become something you can enjoy. You'll be able to express your thoughts, join conversations, and connect with others confidently. So, let's take this journey together. Let's practice every day, build our confidence, and move closer to fluency step by step. Remember, English is not about perfection. It is about freedom, connection, and expressing yourself. Soon, speaking English will feel natural, smooth, and even fun, just like riding a bicycle and feeling the wind as you move forward with confidence. This is exactly what happens with English. True fluency means reaching the point where speaking feels natural and enjoyable, not stressful, forced, or scary. You can join conversations, share your thoughts, and communicate without constantly worrying about every word. But before we go further, let's clear up a very common misunderstanding. Many English learners believe that they must speak perfectly before they can call themselves fluent. Let me say this clearly. That idea is completely false. You do not need to be perfect. In fact, trying to be perfect can actually hurt your progress. Here's why. When you set the impossible goal of perfection, you start judging yourself too harshly. You become nervous, afraid to speak, and worried about making even tiny mistakes. Instead of practicing freely, you hold yourself back. And the result? You either don't speak at all, or when you do, it feels stressful and unnatural. But here's the important truth. Mistakes are not your enemy. Mistakes are actually your teachers. Every error you make is a form of feedback. It shows that you are practicing, experimenting, and learning. Each mistake is a signal that you are pushing yourself forward. So instead of avoiding mistakes, you should welcome them. Every wrong word, every small error, is proof that you are growing and improving. I remember one of my students, Ben, whose story shows this perfectly. Ben was extremely smart. He loved reading English books and could write very well, almost like a native speaker. His essays were polished, his grammar was excellent, and his vocabulary was advanced. On paper, his English looked amazing. But when it came to speaking, everything changed. Ben became very quiet. His sentences were short, his voice soft, and he often stopped in the middle of a thought. He later told me that he was terrified of making mistakes. He was afraid of saying a word incorrectly or using the wrong tense. This fear froze him. Instead of speaking freely, he stayed silent. When we started working together, I realized that the main problem was not his English skills. His reading, writing, and grammar were all excellent. The problem was his fear of making mistakes. That fear stopped him from speaking, even though he knew the language. This is something many learners experience. You might know English well in your head, but when it's time to speak, fear and hesitation take over. The key lesson here is simple. Fluency is about courage, not perfection. It's about speaking despite mistakes. It's about learning from every attempt. The more you allow yourself to make mistakes, the more confident and fluent you become. Mistakes are not failures. They are the stepping stones that help you grow. So, if you want to speak English naturally, start by accepting mistakes as part of learning. Speak freely. Take risks with words and sentences. Every time you try, every time you speak, you are improving. Slowly, you will notice your confidence growing, your speech becoming smoother, and your English feeling natural and enjoyable. Remember, fluency is not about perfection. It is about connection, expression, and courage. When you focus on communicating your ideas rather than avoiding mistakes, you move forward. And that is the true path to speaking English confidently, freely, and naturally. The real problem with Ben wasn't his English skills. It was his mindset. He focused too much on being perfect, and that stopped him from speaking freely. So I helped him shift his focus from perfection to communication. I encouraged him to join a local English conversation group. I told him, don't worry about mistakes. Your goal is not to be perfect. Your goal is simply to talk, to participate, and to share your ideas. At first, Ben was nervous and hesitant. but he decided to try. Later, he told me about his very first meeting with the group. He tried to explain his job as a software developer, something he knew very well in his own language, but in English. The words didn't come out perfectly. He made mistakes, mixed up grammar, and even forgot some words. But here's the most important part. He kept going. That moment marked the beginning of a huge change for him. Something very interesting happened during that first conversation. Because he was nervous, Ben tried too hard to choose the perfect words. While explaining his job, he kept saying the word program when he really meant project. As he realized the mistake, his face grew hot with embarrassment. He thought everyone would notice and feel judgmental. He felt ashamed. But then something wonderful happened. Another group member, a friendly native speaker, simply repeated his sentence using the correct word, project. There was no laughter, no judgment. No one made him feel bad. The conversation continued naturally, as if nothing had happened. That moment was a turning point for Ben. He immediately understood something very important. People care more about your ideas than your small mistakes. That realization opened a door in his mind. From that day on, Ben started to lose his fear. He began speaking more freely. His confidence grew, and his fluency started improving quickly, almost as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. And that is the first important lesson I want you to remember. You don't need to be perfect to speak English well. Small mistakes are okay. What matters most is your ability to express your ideas, connect with others, and keep the conversation going. Every time you speak, even if it's not perfect, you are learning, improving, and moving closer to fluency. Think about it like this. Fluency is about communication, not perfection. It's about saying what you mean, sharing your thoughts, and enjoying the conversation. Mistakes are not a problem. They are a natural part of learning. Every error shows that you are trying, taking risks, and growing. Ben's story shows that one small step, like joining a conversation group and speaking despite mistakes, can change everything. It's not about being flawless. It's about being brave, practicing consistently, and allowing yourself to speak freely. The more you practice, the easier English becomes, and the more confident you feel. So remember, don't focus on perfection. Focus on speaking, participating, and sharing your ideas. Mistakes will happen, and that's okay. Each mistake is a sign that you are moving forward, learning, and improving your fluency. What matters most in English is communication. Your main goal should be to share your thoughts, connect with people, and make yourself understood. Grammar and vocabulary are important, but they will improve naturally as you practice and interact with English regularly. If you wait until you are perfect, you may never start speaking at all. That's why the first step is to focus on communicating, even if you make mistakes. Now, let's look at how you can build a strong foundation for speaking English fluently. A strong foundation is not about memorizing long lists of grammar rules or vocabulary. It is about engaging with English in real life, in ways that feel natural and connected to the world around you. Think of your brain like a computer or a sponge. The more English you put in through listening, reading, and observing, the more your brain has to work with when you speak. If you don't put enough English in, you won't have enough to use when you try to speak. That's why listening and reading are so important. They fill your brain with the sounds, patterns, and rhythms of English. Here's a very important point. You cannot produce naturally what you haven't consumed first. In other words, if you want to speak like a natural English speaker, you first need to hear and read a lot of real English. This means listening to conversations, podcasts, and videos, and reading articles, stories, or anything that interests you. The key is to find materials that challenge you just enough, not too easy, but not so hard that you feel lost. That balance is where learning happens. Even if you don't understand every single word, your brain will figure out the meaning from the context. Slowly, your vocabulary, sentence patterns, and confidence will grow. Over time, the more you listen and read, the easier it becomes to speak naturally. Listening is especially important because listening and speaking are connected. They are like two sides of the same coin. You cannot separate them. When you listen actively, You are training your brain not just to recognize words, but also to notice rhythm, intonation, pauses, and common expressions. These are things that make speech sound natural. For example, when someone says, "How's it going?" you don't translate it word by word in your head. You understand it as a casual greeting. That understanding comes from listening and experiencing English repeatedly. The same goes for speaking. The more you listen, the more your brain stores ready-made chunks of English that you can use in real conversations. Another important idea is variety. Engage with English in many ways. Listen to podcasts, watch videos, read articles or books, and even speak to yourself out loud. Every interaction with English builds your foundation. The combination of listening, reading, and practicing speaking gradually makes English feel natural. So remember, fluency starts with input, all the English you consume. Speaking comes naturally from that input. Focus on understanding and absorbing English in real-life contexts. With patience, practice, and the right balance, your brain will naturally produce English that is smooth, confident, and expressive. Listening is one of the most powerful tools for learning English. When you listen to English that real people use, you are tuning your ear to the music of the language. The more you listen, the more natural your own speaking will become. Listening helps your brain learn English without forcing it to translate every word or think about every grammar rule. When you spend time listening to real English, like conversations between native speakers, news reports, stories, or even casual chats, you give your brain the chance to learn English naturally. Your mind starts connecting sounds with meaning, and over time, understanding English becomes automatic. Instead of stopping to think about every word, you begin to feel how English works. For example, when you hear phrases like, "I was just about to say that," "it goes without saying," or "to make a long story short," in real conversations, something special happens. Your brain starts to remember them as ready-made chunks. Later, when you speak, you don't need to translate from your own language. You can pull these phrases directly from memory. This is how your English starts to sound more natural, fluent, and less textbook-like. Let me give you a real example. My friend Anna, who I mentioned before, struggled a lot with natural conversation. Anna is from Poland, and at first, she tried to translate Polish idioms directly into English. The problem was, many of these idioms didn't make sense in English. They sounded awkward or even funny, and they didn't communicate what she wanted to say. She realized that translating word for word wasn't helping her at all. So Anna decided to change her approach. She stopped trying to translate and started paying attention to how native speakers actually spoke. She listened carefully to everyday conversations, noticing small expressions like, "you know," "right," or "if you ask me." At first, using these phrases felt strange. It almost felt like she was copying or pretending. But with practice, these little expressions began to feel natural. Eventually, they flowed out of her mouth without thinking. This is exactly how your brain learns English naturally. By listening first, you build a mental library of words, phrases, and rhythms. Over time, speaking becomes easier because you already know how the language sounds and how it is used. You don't need to focus on every word or grammar rule. Instead, your speech begins to feel smooth, confident, and natural. Listening also teaches you intonation, pauses, and stress, all the little details that make English sound real. These are things that books and vocabulary lists rarely teach. By noticing how people really speak, you can start using English the way it is actually spoken, not just the way it is written. Anna's story shows that the key is practice and patience. At first, new phrases and expressions may feel awkward. But the more you listen and the more you notice, the more these patterns become automatic. Eventually, your speaking will flow naturally, and your English will sound fluent and comfortable. So remember, the path to natural speaking starts with listening, noticing patterns, and absorbing real English. Over time, these sounds and phrases become a part of you, and speaking becomes not just possible, but enjoyable and effortless. The power of listening is incredible. But it's not just about recognizing individual words. Listening teaches you how words connect, how ideas flow, and how speakers use their voices to show meaning. For example, an English speaker might raise their voice slightly at the end of a sentence to show it's a question, even if the sentence doesn't look like a question on paper. Or they might lower their voice to emphasize something important. These small changes in tone, stress, and rhythm are what make English sound natural. The best way to learn them is by listening carefully to lots of real, authentic English. But listening is only half the story. Reading is just as powerful, though it works in a different way. You can think of reading as listening's quiet but effective partner. While listening trains your ear, reading trains your eye. When you read, you don't just pick up new words. You also learn how sentences are built, how ideas are connected, and how people express opinions. Reading gives you the time to pause, think, and revisit difficult parts, which is something listening doesn't always allow because speech moves quickly. This is why reading is so important. It helps you notice details that might be missed in listening. If you are learning English, I recommend choosing reading materials that are interesting and at the right level. Graded readers, which are books written specifically for learners, are fantastic because they introduce new language gradually. You can also try simple articles, short stories, or news websites designed for English learners. The most important thing is that you enjoy what you read. When you enjoy reading, you keep coming back, and repeated exposure is what helps your brain absorb English naturally. Here's a helpful tip. When you read, don't focus only on individual words. Pay attention to the whole sentence. Notice how ideas are linked using words like because, however, although, or on the other hand. Notice how questions are asked, how opinions are shared, and how examples are given. When you do this, you aren't just learning vocabulary, you're learning the natural patterns and flow of English. By combining listening and reading, you give your brain a complete learning experience. Listening teaches the sounds, rhythm, and flow of speech, while reading gives you time to understand sentence structure and see language in a clear, organized way. Together, they train your brain to think in English, not just translate from your native language. Over time, your brain starts to store ready-made phrases, sentence patterns, and ways of expressing ideas. This makes speaking much easier and more natural. The more you listen and read, the more your English begins to feel alive, like a language you use every day, not just something you study from a book. So remember, listening and reading go hand in hand. Listening tunes your ear to natural speech, while reading trains your eye to see patterns, structure, and meaning. Together, they help you understand, absorb, and use English naturally, making your speaking smoother, more confident, and more fluent. The key is consistent practice, enjoyment, and paying attention to how English is really used in everyday life. When you combine lots of listening with lots of reading, you create a powerful foundation for speaking English. Listening helps you tune your ear to the sounds and rhythm of the language, while reading shows you how ideas are connected, how sentences are built, and how words are used naturally. Together, they fill your brain with real, living English, and little by little, this English will start to come out naturally when you speak. Let's look at an example. Imagine you are reading an article about environmental issues. While reading, you notice the writer often uses phrases like on the one hand and on the other hand. These phrases are used to show two different sides of an argument. At first, you may only notice them as words, but as you see them repeatedly in real texts, they become familiar and automatic. Later, when you want to express a balanced opinion in a conversation, these phrases come to your mind quickly and naturally. Instead of struggling to translate from your native language, you already have the English ready to use. I remember a student of mine named David. David loved science fiction, and he decided to start reading science fiction books in English. At first, he chose simplified versions that were easier to understand, and then he moved on to more advanced books as his skills improved. Initially, he thought he was just learning new vocabulary, words like spaceships, aliens, or technology. But in reality, he was learning much more than that. By reading, David was picking up story structures, descriptions, and natural conversations between characters. He was unknowingly building a mental library of English. This library helped him not only talk about books but also discuss other topics in English. That is the real power of reading. The more you read, the more your brain absorbs correct, natural English. You see real sentences, idiomatic expressions, and grammar in action. Over time, your internal English database grows, and when it's time to speak, the right words and phrases are already inside you, ready to come out naturally. Reading also gives you variety, which is very important. When you read different kinds of texts, novels, blogs, news articles, or even academic texts, you expose yourself to different ways English is used. Each type of text teaches you something new. Novels show natural conversations and emotions. Blogs show casual opinions. News articles teach formal reporting, and academic texts introduce logical organization and specialized vocabulary. This variety builds a complete and flexible English mind. Another benefit is that repeated exposure through reading trains your brain to recognize patterns in English. You start noticing how ideas are linked with words like because, although, however, or on the other hand. You see how questions are asked, how examples are introduced, and how arguments are structured. Slowly, your brain learns to think in English rather than translating from your native language. David's story shows that reading isn't just about understanding words. It's about absorbing the structure, flow, and rhythm of English, which later makes speaking easier, smoother, and more natural. When your brain has a strong internal library of English, speaking becomes effortless and confident. When you read widely, you're exposed to different styles of English. Some English is formal, like in newspapers or academic texts. Some is casual and friendly, like conversations with friends or blogs. Some is professional, like business emails or presentations. By experiencing all these styles, you prepare yourself for any kind of conversation, whether it's a job interview, a friendly chat, or a classroom discussion. Now, let's talk about another very important part of fluency: vocabulary. Listening and reading help you recognize words when you hear or see them. This is called passive knowledge. But to truly speak fluently, you need active knowledge. That means you can use words in real conversations instantly, without hesitation. Here's the key: don't just memorize single words by themselves. Instead, learn phrases or ready-made groups of words that native speakers often use. These are called chunks, and they are the real building blocks of fluent speech. For example, instead of only learning the word difficult, learn the phrase a difficult situation. Instead of only learning important, learn phrases like it's important to remember or an important decision. Native speakers don't think word by word when they speak. They use chunks automatically. If you do the same, your English will sound smoother, faster, and more natural. Here's a fun example. Imagine someone tells you surprising news. A native speaker would probably say you're kidding. It's simple, natural, and quick. But a learner thinking word by word might say, "Are you telling me something that is not true?" Grammatically correct, yes, but not natural. By learning you're kidding as a chunk, you can use it instantly and sound just like a native speaker. Other very useful chunks include "I'm looking forward to it," "It depends on," "to be honest," "as far as I know," and "at the end of the day." If you practice these kinds of phrases, they will come out naturally when you speak, without thinking. The beauty of chunks is that they save time and make your speech smoother. Instead of building sentences word by word in your head, your brain can pull out ready-made phrases and you sound confident and fluent. Over time, these chunks become automatic and your conversations flow just like a native speaker's. Another important point: you don't have to learn every single phrase at once. Start with common, practical chunks that you can use in daily life. Use them in your conversations, practice them out loud, and repeat them until they feel natural. Soon, your brain will start storing these patterns automatically, making speaking English much easier and more enjoyable. By combining listening, reading, and learning chunks, you're building a complete system for fluency. Listening tunes your ear, reading trains your eye and exposes you to natural structures, and chunks train your brain to speak naturally. Together, they make English feel alive, usable, and effortless. The main idea is simple. Focus on communication, not perfection. Use chunks, practice every day, and expose yourself to real English. Over time, your speech will become smooth, natural, and confident, and speaking will feel much more like riding a bicycle. You just get on and it flows. You don't have to stop and translate in your head when you speak. If you practice ready-made chunks of English, the words are already there, waiting for you. Let me explain. When you learn phrases like on the one hand and on the other hand, something very powerful happens. Your brain no longer has to build each sentence word by word. Instead, it can grab the chunk and use it immediately. This makes speaking much easier, faster, and more natural. Think about it. If you have a collection of these ready-to-use phrases in your mind, you won't pause awkwardly in the middle of a sentence. You won't hesitate as much. Your speech will sound smoother, more confident, and more fluent because the words come automatically. This is one of the secrets of fluency. Having pieces of language ready to go so you can speak freely without overthinking every word. Now, let's focus on vocabulary. A very effective way to learn new words is to always learn them inside full sentences, not by themselves. Even better, create sentences that are personal to you, connected to your life. For example, take the word enthusiastic. Don't just write enthusiastic equals very interested or excited. That's not enough. Instead, create sentences like, I'm really enthusiastic about learning English. My best friend is an enthusiastic runner who trains every day. Do you see the difference? When a word is inside a sentence about your own life, it becomes real and meaningful. It connects to your feelings, experiences, and daily life. That makes it easier to remember and much easier to use naturally when speaking. I strongly suggest keeping a special vocabulary notebook. This could be a small paper notebook you carry with you, or a digital app on your phone like Quizlet, or even just your Notes app. For each new word, write the word itself, its meaning in simple English, the pronunciation, a sentence that connects the word to your life. The key is to actively use the words you learn. Just recognizing a word when reading or listening isn't enough. Your brain needs to practice retrieving it. When you use new words in your own sentences, repeat them aloud and write them down in your vocabulary notebook. Your brain stores them for speaking automatically. Here's another tip. When you speak or write using your new words, try to use chunks and phrases together. For example, instead of saying, I like English a lot, you could say, I'm really enthusiastic about learning English because it helps me connect with people. This way, you are combining vocabulary, ready-made chunks, and your personal ideas. That's exactly how native speakers use language, and that's how fluency develops naturally. Remember, learning English is not about memorizing random words or grammar rules. It's about practical, meaningful use. Listening, reading, learning chunks, and creating personal sentences all work together. Over time, your brain builds a ready-to-use library of English, and speaking becomes smooth, natural, and confident. When you learn a new word, it's not enough to just know the meaning. You need to give it a home in your memory. For each word, write down the word itself, how to say it, and at least one personal sentence using it. This way, every new word is connected to your life, your feelings, and your experiences. That makes it much easier to remember and use later. Here's the most important part. Review your words every day, even for just 5 minutes. Read the sentences aloud. Try saying them without looking. This is called active recall, and it's very powerful. When you say a word out loud, you move it from passive knowledge, you understand it when you see it, to active knowledge. You can use it instantly when speaking. Let's try a simple exercise. I'll give you a common word, challenge. Your job is to make a sentence out loud, connecting it to your life. Don't worry about mistakes or pauses. Just try. Maybe you said, learning to speak English fluently is a big challenge for me, but I'm enjoying it. Or, yesterday I faced a challenge at work, but I solved it. Do you see what just happened? By creating a personal sentence, you gave that word a place in your memory. You connected it to your own life, which makes it much easier to remember and use in the future. This is how vocabulary becomes active, and over time, your words become part of your speaking toolbox, ready to use in any conversation. Now let's talk about grammar, another area where many learners get stuck. Too often, grammar is seen as a list of strict rules to memorize. It feels heavy, scary, or boring. But grammar doesn't have to feel like a cage. Grammar is simply a set of tools to help you say exactly what you mean. Here's the real challenge. Many learners already know grammar rules in their heads, but they struggle to use them naturally when speaking. Knowing a rule is one thing. Using it in a fast, real-time conversation is another. This is where most learners get stuck. They freeze, hesitate, or make mistakes because their brain is trying to remember the rules instead of thinking in English. So, what's the solution? The key is practice in context, not memorization. Use grammar in sentences that matter to you. Speak about your life, your experiences, and your ideas. Make sentences that are personal and meaningful. When grammar is practiced this way, it stops being a rule to follow and starts being a natural part of your speech. The goal is simple. Grammar should help your communication, not block it. Combine it with the vocabulary and chunks you already know, and you will notice a huge difference. You'll start speaking more freely, your sentences will flow naturally, and your English will feel like a tool you control, not a set of obstacles you have to overcome. With daily practice, personal examples, and real-life use, vocabulary and grammar stop being abstract concepts. They become living parts of your English, ready to help you speak confidently and fluently in any situation. So, what can you do to improve your grammar naturally? Instead of just doing exercises from textbooks, start noticing grammar patterns in the English you hear and read every day. Pay attention to how native speakers structure their sentences. Then, practice using those same patterns when you speak. This is how grammar becomes automatic. It's not about memorizing endless rules. It's about training your brain to use them without hesitation. Let's look at an example with tenses, which are essential if you want to tell good stories in English. You need to use the simple past, past continuous, and present perfect. Instead of only learning rules, try describing your last weekend using all three tenses. For instance, simple past. Last Saturday, I went to the park. Past perfect. I had been planning to go all week, so I was really looking forward to it. Past continuous plus past perfect. While I was walking through the park, I suddenly saw an old friend I hadn't seen in years. Do you see how natural that sounds? This type of practice helps you weave different tenses into your speech without having to stop and think about grammar rules. The same approach works for conditionals, phrases like, if I had more time, I would travel more. If it rains tomorrow, we'll stay home. These aren't just grammar exercises. They are real tools for expressing your thoughts about possibilities, future plans, advice, or regrets. And they are used all the time in everyday conversations, so practicing them makes your English feel alive and useful. Let me share a story to show how effective this can be. My friend Elena always struggled with the present perfect tense. She understood the rule perfectly. Use it to talk about experiences, unfinished time, or recent events. But when she spoke, she couldn't use it naturally. Her speech felt slow and hesitant because she was constantly thinking about the rules instead of speaking. So I gave her a small challenge. For 1 week, she kept a present perfect journal. Every day, she wrote 5 simple sentences about her real life. For example, I have visited Paris twice. I haven't finished my homework yet. My sister has just started a new job. At first, it felt strange and a little repetitive, but writing about her real life made the sentences meaningful and personal. After a few days, she started thinking in English rather than translating from her native language. By the end of the week, she noticed a huge difference. She could speak using the present perfect tense naturally, without overthinking. This shows the secret. Grammar becomes real when it is connected to your life and practice. Reading about it, memorizing rules, or doing exercises alone isn't enough. You need to use grammar in sentences that matter to you, sentences you might actually say in real conversations. That's how your brain starts to absorb grammar naturally and make it automatic. Remember, English isn't just about rules. It's about communication, stories, ideas, and daily experiences. When you practice grammar in real, meaningful ways, it stops being a barrier. Instead, it becomes a tool that helps you express yourself clearly, confidently, and fluently. At first, Elena struggled with her English homework. But after just 1 week, something amazing happened. She began using the present perfect tense naturally in her conversations, without even thinking about it. This shows something very important. Grammar becomes automatic when it is connected to your life and practiced consistently in context. You don't need endless drills or worksheets. What you need are meaningful sentences about real experiences, repeated often. Here's the most important truth. You cannot learn to speak without speaking. Reading about grammar won't make you fluent. Doing worksheets won't make you fluent. The only way is to practice producing English out loud, regularly, and with focus. Let me give you an example. I once had a student named Leo who wanted to improve his American accent. He chose a short monologue from his favorite TV show and decided to shadow it every day for a month. If you're not familiar with shadowing, it means listening to something in English and repeating it as closely as possible, copying the sounds, rhythm, and intonation. Leo didn't just repeat casually. He recorded himself every day, listened carefully, compared his version to the original, and practiced all the little details, the rhythm of his speech, his intonation, and even how his mouth moved. After only 1 month, his colleagues noticed a big difference. They told him his accent sounded much smoother, more authentic and natural. This shows the power of focused, consistent practice. One small exercise, done regularly, can completely change the way you speak. Shadowing is excellent, but it's not the only way to practice speaking on your own. Another very effective technique is answering questions aloud. There are many websites and resources with lists of common conversation questions for English learners. Here's how to use them. Pick a topic you enjoy and answer the questions out loud, as if talking to a real person. Don't worry about mistakes. Speak freely. Over time, this trains your brain to think and respond in English naturally. For example, if the question is, "What do you usually do on weekends?" you can answer, "I usually go for a run in the park and then read a book. Sometimes I meet my friends for coffee." The key is to make your answers personal and meaningful, not just memorized phrases. When your answers connect to your real life, your speech becomes more fluent, confident, and natural. You can also combine this with shadowing, vocabulary chunks, and grammar practice. For instance, use new phrases and grammar patterns you've learned while answering questions. This way, your brain links words, grammar, and real communication together. Over time, speaking becomes automatic, like riding a bike. You don't think about each word, you just speak smoothly and confidently. The lesson here is simple. Practice regularly, practice out loud, and practice with meaning. Reading, listening, and writing are helpful, but speaking is where fluency really happens. Every time you try, even if it's not perfect, you're improving. Small, consistent steps lead to big results. Here's a simple but powerful way to practice speaking English. Answer questions out loud. Instead of just thinking about your answer in your head, say it aloud. This may feel strange at first, but it trains your brain to turn ideas into real sentences and builds fluency naturally. For example, imagine the question is, "What is your favorite type of food and why?" Don't just think pizza. Expand your answer. You could say, "My favorite food is definitely pizza, especially with lots of cheese, mushrooms, and maybe some olives. I love it because it's so versatile, and it's perfect for sharing with friends and family on a relaxed evening." See the difference? By building a full answer out loud, you practice vocabulary, grammar, and speaking all at once. Your brain is learning to grab words from memory and put them together into smooth, natural sentences. Let's try another example. If I ask, if you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would you go and what would you do there? Pause for a moment and actually speak your answer. Maybe you choose Japan or Italy. Maybe you talk about the food you'd try, the sights you'd see, or the culture you'd experience. The important part is to say it aloud in a few sentences, connecting your thoughts to your spoken English. This is how your brain starts thinking in English instead of translating from your native language. Another excellent technique is summarizing or retelling. After listening to a podcast, watching a video, or reading an article, explain it out loud in your own words. If it's a story, describe the characters, the setting, the plot, and the main events. Pretend you're telling a friend who hasn't read or heard it yet. This exercise has several benefits at once. First, you process the information deeply, which helps you understand and remember it. Second, you practice choosing the most important points and putting them into sentences. Third, you use vocabulary that's already fresh in your mind, which makes it easier to recall in future conversations. For example, imagine you just finished reading a short news article about a local festival. Instead of just reading it once and moving on, try saying, "Yesterday, I read about a big festival in my city. People were celebrating with music, dancing, and food from different countries. It sounded very lively and fun. I wish I could have gone to see it myself." Notice how you naturally combine new words and phrases into meaningful sentences. You're learning grammar, vocabulary, and speaking at the same time, just like native speakers do when they talk about real-life experiences. These two simple methods, answering questions aloud and retelling or summarizing, are incredibly effective. They connect your thoughts to spoken English, train your brain to produce sentences quickly, and build your confidence step by step. The more you practice them daily, the more natural and automatic your English will become. Remember, fluency isn't about perfection. It's about being able to share your ideas clearly and confidently. Every time you speak out loud, even if you make mistakes, you're improving. This is how real English learning happens, through action, not just studying. Imagine a group of scientists who have created a new kind of artificial intelligence, or AI, that can write poetry so realistic it almost feels like a human wrote it. This is fascinating because it makes us think about creativity in a new way. Usually, we assume that only humans can create art, but this AI challenges that idea. It raises questions about the difference between art made by people and art made by machines. When you read about discoveries like this, it's important not just to memorize the facts, but to put them into your own words. This is a very useful skill for real-life conversations. When you take an idea and explain it in simple, clear English, you're actually training your brain. You are learning how to understand something complicated, process it, and then express it in a way that other people can understand. Every time you do this, it's like giving yourself a mini presentation. This kind of practice makes your speaking more confident, sharper, and more natural. You are improving your ability to think quickly, organize your ideas, and communicate clearly, all at the same time. One of the best ways to practice this is by summarizing or retelling what you have just read or heard. It could be an article, a video, or even a story someone told you. First, you understand the main points. Then, in your own words, you explain it as clearly as possible. You don't have to use the exact words from the original text. In fact, it's better if you don't. By doing this, you are actively training your mind to think in English. You are turning passive understanding into active expression. Over time, this will make you much more confident in speaking because you will be used to thinking and explaining ideas quickly. Another fun and powerful practice is role-playing. This is especially useful if you enjoy imagining real-life situations. Even if you don't have someone to practice with, you can do this alone. Think about situations you might face in an English-speaking environment. For example, you could imagine ordering food in a busy restaurant, checking into a hotel, asking for directions, or even preparing for a job interview. The key is to play both roles. Pretend to be the person asking questions first, then switch and pretend to be the person answering. Ask questions, give answers, and complete the full conversation. This way, you are practicing realistic English, not just random sentences. The best part is that you can make it fun. Change your voice, exaggerate your expressions, or even act dramatically. This makes the practice more engaging and helps you remember phrases and sentences better. You are also training your brain to respond naturally, as if you were really in that situation. Over time, role-playing can make your speaking more fluent, natural, and flexible. You will feel more prepared for real conversations, whether they are casual chats, professional meetings, or even unexpected situations. By combining these two practices, explaining things in your own words and role-playing real situations, you are building very strong English skills. You are learning to understand ideas, organize them, and communicate them clearly. You are also training yourself to speak confidently in different situations. This is exactly how successful language learners become fluent. They don't just memorize words, they actively use language in ways that are meaningful and practical. By practicing regularly, you will notice that your speaking becomes sharper, your thinking in English becomes faster, and your confidence grows every day. Making your role-play practice feel lively and real can make a huge difference. The more you act it out as if it's really happening, the more you'll remember and the more confident you will feel when you face similar situations in real life. Think of role-playing like a rehearsal for your brain and your mouth. By practicing ahead of time, you prepare yourself so that when the real situation comes, you won't freeze. You'll already have a sense of what to say and how to respond. This type of practice builds both mental and verbal confidence, which is exactly what you need to speak naturally in English. Another extremely useful method is recording yourself. At first, it might feel strange or even uncomfortable. Most people don't enjoy hearing their own voice played back. But trust me, this is one of the most effective solo exercises you can do. Recording yourself allows you to step back and listen to how you actually sound, instead of how you think you sound. Here's how you can do it. Open the voice recorder app on your phone. Pick a topic to speak about. It can be anything. Talk about your day, describe the weather, give your opinion on a movie, share a funny story, or even describe the room you're in. Try to speak continuously for 1 or 2 minutes, without stopping. After you finish recording, listen carefully to what you said. Focus on a few key things. Are your words clear? Are you speaking too quickly or too slowly? Does your voice sound natural, or is it flat? Do you hesitate or get stuck in certain places? You don't need to correct every mistake at once because that can feel overwhelming. Instead, pick 1 or 2 things to work on each time. For example, you might notice that you say, or like, too often, or maybe there's a sound you frequently mispronounce. By paying attention to small details and improving them gradually, you will steadily get better over time. Recording yourself effectively turns you into your own teacher. You become more aware of how you actually sound, which is very different from how you think you sound. This awareness is powerful because it gives you practical feedback that you can use to improve your pronunciation, rhythm, and confidence. You start to notice patterns in your speech and can make changes that really matter. Of course, learning English isn't only about practicing by yourself. Real fluency comes from speaking with other people. Conversations with others are where your skills are truly tested and strengthened. It is in these interactions that everything you've practiced, role-playing, summarizing, recording yourself, meets reality. Talking with real people challenges you to respond naturally, use the right words and context, and adjust to different speaking styles. This is where your English really grows and becomes flexible. Without this step, practice remains only practice. It is through speaking with others that you gain real confidence, improve your listening, and learn to communicate effectively. By combining solo exercises like role-playing and recording yourself with real conversations, you create a strong foundation for fluency. You train your mind to think in English, your mouth to speak clearly, and your confidence to grow naturally. Each step you take builds on the last, preparing you for real-life situations. With time, effort, and consistent practice, speaking English becomes easier, faster, and more natural. You begin to feel ready for any situation, whether it's casual chats, professional meetings, or unexpected encounters. This combination of self-practice and real interaction is the key to becoming a confident, fluent English speaker.